Would you trade him for Tyreek Hill right now?
If I'm a winning team?
Yes. The answer is yes. Do it.
Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Week 6 NFL Power Rankings. Additionally, a player by player, well, not every single player, recap and projection for what's going on fantasy-wise on each of these teams. Jake Ciely from theathletic.com is on the line. I missed you last week. I was traveling, so we're back after a 1-week absence. It's good to see you. Good to see you and hear your voice again.
It was our early bye week. We got it out of the way. We're like the Detroit Lions. That's what we were doing.
Yeah, would you prefer an earlier or later bye week, do you think?
If I'm in a real NFL team, I would prefer dead middle of the season, like a nice recuperation. But like just for the feeling of what we do, like early is like, I'm still in the flow. I'm ready. Like I could go a few more weeks before just give me a break. And then as you and I talk all the time, we get kind of that second win around Thanksgiving. So like just a little bit before Thanksgiving to get that second win going.
I can see that. I think it really worked out well for the Eagles, if any team, getting this early bye to get all their guys back without having to like force them to play injured during the game.
Yeah, and I think that comes into it too. It's like, if you're off to an injured start, like the Eagles makes a lot of sense. On the flip side, maybe if you're the Lions and you feel like you've been playing well, you don't need it. And like even Laporta being not 100% on the field anyway, like just kind of keep going. So I think it depends also on the team.
Well, let's get to the tiers. The power rankings, the last week, which you can find everything, the injury report, the pickups, and these power rankings down in the description. They're in the Mayo Media newsletter. That link, free to click on. Boom, you can follow along with us and see how the teams were doing last week. But tier 1, it's one team. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They play on Monday Night Football, and that's it for me in tier 1. Would you put anyone else up there? And I do think that they're probably closer to all of the tier 2 teams, but until they lose, the reigning Super Bowl champs are number 1.
I mean, they're number 1, but I think that comes down to, do you think some team deserves to be in the conversation, or is it because they're number 1 and there's no debate of them being number 1 that we want to include somebody else? I think the fact that they came close, that they've been struggling enough, and on the flip side, I don't know what more the Vikings have to do to deserve to be in this conversation. I kind of been pushing you to put them higher this entire time, and look, I think that's what it comes down to. You tell me right now they face each other, I think there's a world right now on a neutral field where the Vikings could win just because of the issue. Like the Chiefs could use a bye right now. There are a lot of things going on between the injuries and just not everything clicking. And you can make that argument, which we've is that even not clicking, they're still undefeated. But I think at this point, with the way that the Vikings have been playing on both sides of the ball, and even in a pretty poor game where the Jets got after them the entire time and they still came away pretty handily, I think the Vikings deserve to be in the conversation.
I don't. I had this discussion last night, and we'll get to the tier 2 where the Vikings live, and I got kind of strong-armed in putting the Vikings ahead of the Ravens. But on a neutral side, I would take the Ravens over the Vikings if they played a game.
I don't know. I wouldn't right now. The Ravens are too inconsistent for me.
Maybe, but I think they have the proper firepower to go toe-to-toe with the Vikings, and I think their offense would just simply beat the Vikings defense, which has been excellent so far, although it's just like after the first quarter of that London game with the Vikings, they didn't look very good. Like it's the moment Aaron Jones went out, it was bad news for that offense.
So I will agree with you on that. But if you want to talk about good timing, I mean, their bye and the Aaron Jones injury, I think if we saw another game without that and it being disjointed, it's also the Jets. The Jets actually played one of their better defensive games of the year with I think it was the highest pressure rate they had all season. Now, is that a product of the Vikings offense without Aaron Jones? Is that a product of the Vikings offense in general? That's something we're going to have to be concerned about going forward. Sure. And if you want to talk like tier 1, tier 2, I mean, obviously, Houston Texans are going to be in tier 2 for me with Detroit, and I do have the Ravens that high. Again, if you want to nitpick that, like I just would be different than you. Like I would include that, on any given day, I know the Chiefs are undefeated and I know the Vikings are too, but I think there's about 5 teams I would take that on a coin flip. Basically, like if I was creating a line on a neutral field, I don't think the spread would be more than 2 points.
What, of Kansas City and Minnesota? It would be Kansas City by 2.5 or Kansas City by 3. Ditto for the Ravens over the Vikings. And the Lions would be probably 2-point favorites over the Vikings too. Not saying that that's accurate and that I wouldn't bet the Vikings in some of those spots, but that's what the line would be.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like 2 for me. So, I mean, 2.5, 3 is still in that same range, right? Like you said, it doesn't mean you wouldn't bet. But my point being, I would say this is the order. I'll just give them to them. Chiefs, Vikings, Texans, Lions, Ravens. That's my tier 1. Those are all that, like, I see those as legitimate Super Bowl contenders.
Okay, so let's just stick on Kansas City fantasy-wise for a second. They have not played this week. They play on Monday night against the Saints. We don't know the result of that. If I did, I wouldn't be doing the show. I would just bet millions of dollars on the game. I go borrow millions of dollars if I was from the future, bet on the game, and then never have to do any of this stuff again. But I don't know that. But they go on by. That's going to help them a little bit. How do you see this backfield shaking down? Because obviously Pacheco's still going to be out for a while. It seems like Kareem Hunt has taken the reins as the ball carrier, but that's fickle to the point where if he fumbles, you could get Carson Steele back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm guessing, is going to be back after the bye week, is what it seems right now. And then P. Ryan almost seems locked into this third down role that if you had to start one, I'm guessing it would be Kareem Hunt.
It would be Kareem Hunt. And if you were talking about tonight, just before the rankings, I would solidly inside the top 20. You have 4 teams on a bye, too. So you're missing 2 from the Lions right away. But I think that Kareem Hunt right now, until it turns, and that's the risk, is what you kind of just laid out, is that it could turn any given week. I don't know that Carson Steele is completely done. I think it was a fun story. I think the Chiefs were like, yeah, he's performing. We're kind of almost backed into the scenario. And as soon as the fumble happened, well, let's turn and see if Kareem Hunt has anything left. Because last year, didn't kind of look like he had much left. Now he's, of course, on the Chiefs, a much better team. But if Kareem Hunt goes out and has a stinker or 2, and Edwards-Helaire is back on the field, and everything's right with him in that world, I think that he could be in the mix, maybe even a 40%. But I don't know that Clyde Edwards-Helaire will slide into the lead role unless Kareem Hunt struggles, fumbles a couple times. And that's the biggest issue is now there's a world also where we're in a full committee where it's Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Perine, because you brought up Perine. I don't think Perine's going away. So I think that's the worst case scenario. But as for now, until it happens, which would suck if you start the player in the week it happens. But as for right now, I would still consider Kareem Hunt the RB2.
At receiver.
And RB2.
Obviously, without Rashee Rice, it's going to be 4 to 8 weeks is what it looks like right now. So not season ending, which is great. Hollywood Brown will be back sometime in December. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We need to play some of these fantasy games in between during the weeks. And if you did want to play anyone from the Chiefs, it did seem like the moment Rice went out, it came back to being the Kelsey show. Do you think that continues, or was that just, hey, we got nothing else going on right now, let's just throw to Travis Kelsey, that maybe after a week, be it Juju? I think it's Justin Watson after Worthy, not Juju or Sky Moore. That would be, but I could be dead wrong on that. I just like Justin Watson better than those guys.
I know you do. I actually referenced you on the show last week with Meany. I was like, I know when I do the show with Pat, he's going to bring up Justin Watson because of the big plays and the upside there. Like, this offense needed, we talked about this from the entire start of the season, to get Travis Kelsey going. And I don't think it necessarily has to come down to Rashee Rice vacated the area. There wasn't. Travis Kelsey, we talked about it on your show. There was a wide open play where he threw his arm up that just Patrick Mahomes wasn't looking in his direction yet, or already had looked in his direction and hadn't come back around because something else opened up. The point being is that Kelsey had some opportunities. Obviously, you lose Rice, you're going to pepper Kelsey even more than you were. But I think this is, Kelsey's back to being Kelsey. But my point being is, I kind of think this was going to happen anyway. Kelsey was going to get back to being Kelsey. So I think it comes down to Xavier Worthy needing to step up, but I don't know if they're ready for him to, because they still don't even use him. Limited route tree, we knew that coming out of college. I think that's part of the problem, is that you see him, they got the design sweeps, the backfield runs, but like go routes and everything, and does he incorporate the rest of his game? Is he ready for that? And that's where we kind of have that discussion as you're bringing up. If it's Juju Smith or Justin Watson, this is what it finally takes for Sky Moore to be a thing. I actually took a flyer on Justin Watson like you did, because biggest upside on his plays. But it wouldn't shock me if Juju Smith-Schuster just ends up being the guy, and basically their version of Jacoby Myers, which means it's only a wide receiver 4, and we're not that excited anyway.
You can get all my rankings every single week in that Mayo Media newsletter. You can sub to it for free, where all the pickups are right now, down in the description. I did want to ask you about tight ends, and what tight ends would you actually just feel good about starting every single week? Because I have a list of, I guess, 5 of them, maybe 6, I suppose. I think Evan Ingram will come back next week, and I would actually throw him into that mix. So Kelsey, Kittle, Ferguson, McBride, Bowers, Ingram. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
100%. That's it. And honestly, Ingram could end up going sideways. Like, if this is, like, depending on Trevor Lawrence's play, depending on looking at last year's team and this year's team, and maybe he doesn't use Evan Ingram as much as he does with the emergence of Brian Thomas. I'm not saying, like, as of right now, I'm agreeing with you. I think that one could even change, and that's it. And the only hope that you have is that in a few weeks after their bye, we can throw Hawkinson's name into this mix.
Well, Hawkinson, the Vikings go on bye this week, and then Hawkinson, I'm guessing, is back week 7.
That's what it sounded like. So, yeah.
So yeah, there's another one. Let's. I mean, I guess Laporta is on that list too, but probably at the bottom based on everything
we were
seen.
forgetting somebody.
Yeah,
good old Laporta.
Well,
I don't know if you could trust him right now.
No, neither do I. But I think I'd be like, hey, when I'm just looking at like this week's rankings, like Dalton Kincaid is 6th and Cole Kmet is 7th. Tucker Kraft I had at 8. Well, obviously, he outperformed that. But if Romeo Doubs ends up coming back, when Christian Watson comes back, like his role isn't going to be the same. And he only had 4 targets. Like he's not going to score a 66-yard touchdown every week.
Exactly. And I'm glad you kind of brought that up because I think Laporta's now in the group of, at least of right now, until it turns. Right now, he's in the group of, it's the Kyle Pitts. Like last week, Kyle Pitts still a tight end 1 because why? Where else are you going to turn? Are you going to take a flyer on Brenton Strange? Okay, that worked out this week, but like they're all the same thing. This is what tight end is. It's you're hoping for a touchdown and 12 points, or you're going to get 2. That's just the world we live in outside of the ones we just brought up, the only ones we trust. I mean, Tyler Conklin 1 week, 0 Tyler Conklin the next week. That's just what tight ends are.
I would trade Kyle Pitts right now if you have him. That would be my move.
Of course.
Although this is what the problem that fantasy owners always encounter. It's like, well, I drafted him so highly. Now he had a good game. It's like, why would I ever trade him? It's like, no, this is when you want to trade this guy. When he goes back.
Get the hell away.
Yeah, when he's not playing Tampa and Kirk Cousins doesn't throw for 500 yards, that maybe he goes back to 2 for 27 again.
Yeah, I know we're not talking about it right now, but when we get to the Jets, sell high and Garrett Wilson right now. There's another perfect example.
Well, I think the bigger one is Mark Andrews. Like game flow. Mark Andrews was game flow dependent against the Bengals anyway, and he still didn't have a good game. Really, like that's probably the best game you're going to get from him. Maybe he has one spike somewhere else, but if you can sell him on name value after like a mediocre game, do it. You do not want to be starting Mark Andrews.
No, and the bigger one is I wouldn't be surprised if perception-wise people are willing to give up more for Isaiah Likely. So throw him in trades too.
All right. Monday Night Football, as we mentioned, has not happened as of yet, but that's good news for all of you who enjoyed the Mondays. Underdog, right now, code MAYO, not only gets you a $1,000 deposit bonus, up to, there's a Patrick Mahomes free square on Monday Night Football as well for all first-time players using code MAYO. So use that to your advantage. I got 3 plays for you, Jake, on Monday Night Football. Alvin Kamara, more than 15.2 fantasy points. Rashid Shaheed, more than 8.8 fantasy points, and Justin Watson, more than 25.5 receiving yards. That pays 6-1. If you throw in the free square of 0.5 total yards for Patrick Mahomes higher, that goes up 10-1. So use code MAYO right now at Underdog and take advantage of that. How do you feel about those 3 plays?
I like all of them, especially because Justin Watson takes 1 or 2 catches to get there for that.
And Kamara, I would always be iffy. I know he's like the number 1 fantasy running back right now, but without Taysom Hill playing, that he's going to get the goal line carries, which is not always locked in when Taysom Hill's there.
Oh yeah, no Taysom Hill, fractured ribs. Like maybe that's the issue. Maybe the issue is like this team is competitive with and without him. So Alvin Kamara is going to get all the work, but they're just going to get stomped tonight.
So code MAYO at Underdog right now. Go hit that up. Sub to this channel, by the way. We're almost at 50,000 subs. We'd love to get there. Need your help on that. And smash the like while you're here. And give me your tier 1/tier 2 of the power rankings down in the description as well, because obviously Jake's tier 1 is much bigger than my one team tier 1. But here's my tier 2. It is number 2, last week 3, the Detroit Lions. Last week 4, this week 3, the Minnesota Vikings. Baltimore at number 4. Houston jumps from 11 to number 5. And I still have San Francisco at number 6, because there's a very legitimate case that San Francisco could be 5-0 and not 2-3 when their biggest fault is blowing 2-score leads in the fourth quarter. Feel like that's something they get rectified at some point.
You feel like it, but 3 losses are 3 losses. I'm still not going to put them quite that high, but I mean, there's only 2 names that I would put in front of them. So the difference is just I don't have them on this tier. But you're not wrong.
When do you think we see McCaffrey back? Week 10?
That's where I've been the entire time. That's where I keep telling people on podcasts for trading. The only thing is I hesitated that one week where they're like, oh, the tendonitis is in the other Achilles now. Like, what is it, like jumping across his body? But the report after that was that everything went fine. He's still on track. He's trying to practice. He's exercising and lifting weights, blah, blah, blah. Point being, still continues to sound like week 10, which means, I don't know about you, Pat, but I keep saying this on like when I do the quick wraparound podcast that I do, is that I'm not trading Jordan Mason unless I'm getting low-end RB1 value. Like, I still need to get fringe RB1 value, because if it's not till week 10, guess what? I still get 4 more weeks, because of the bye, of top 10 running back performance. Like, I know you want to get away from it before the bottom completely falls out, and every additional week means you're going to get less. But if I ride them all the way and then get nothing, I'm kind of okay with that, because it's no guarantee McCaffrey comes back, and when it's no guarantee McCaffrey comes back and doesn't have an issue right in that first game. We've seen it before with Saquon Barkley.
And there's no guarantee that McCaffrey doesn't get re-injured when he comes back. Then all of a sudden you have a top 5 running back again.
That's
if
what
you don't
that's what I
trade
meant. Yeah.
Jordan Mason. What would you give up for McCaffrey right now? Like, when we say buy low, if people have been holding McCaffrey this long, in a normal year, it would be so detrimental to have him on your team as the first overall pick. But just scanning the first round of draft picks, like, everyone's first round pick sucks, so it's not that big of a deal this year.
No, I think that if you're looking for like Garrett Wilson, I don't think you'll get that. But like Garrett coming off that game, Garrett Wilson sell high immediately. I would take that as a trade that I would go get Christian McCaffrey for. So kind of like that range is wide receiver 2s, RB 2s, sell high and tank Bigsby. People thinking he's taking the job, which could be the new lead, but that split's not going to completely disappear with Travis Etienne. So I'd be sitting in that range again. It's all relative. I always put trade chart links in my ranks every single week to other people like Alex Korf and Draft Sharks and stuff like that. And they're all different. Why? Because everybody values things differently. So like I always tell people it's a starting point. Just because you and I, me and you, Pat Mayo, sit here and say, oh, go trade blank for blank, doesn't mean 9 out of 10 managers who have the same thing are going to agree that's proper value.
Detroit, Minnesota, Baltimore, we've already discussed them. Houston at number 5. Like, okay, let me ask you this. Neutral site game right now. And the reason that the Niners lost to Arizona is because their kicker got hurt and they couldn't attempt any field goals anymore. They kicked one of them. They end up winning the game in that spot instead of having to go for it on 4th down all the time. But if it was Houston versus San Francisco on a neutral site field tomorrow, who do you think would be favored? And why is it San Francisco?
Oh, who they'd be favored? I was going to say, there we go. I was like, who would I take? I'm still taking Houston. You can call me a homer now at this point. I'm still taking the Texans. Like, to go back to what you said, I don't disagree in the optics of the 49ers. But at the same time, I feel like there's always some excuse. Like, it's the buddy that you have that you just stop being friends with because he never shows up to anything. Because there's always something going on, and I can't make it all of a sudden this weekend, or something happened, and my dog threw up on the carpet, and I wasn't able. There's always some excuse, and it just feels like something's off with the 49ers. Maybe it's Christian McCaffrey. Maybe we're gonna get to week 10, 11, and it's gonna be like, oh, San Francisco, number 2, number 1, and that's fine. Just as of right now, I would take the Lions on a neutral site. I would take the Ravens on a neutral site, despite the fact that we had that little disagreement. And I would take the Texans. I would take all 4 teams. San Francisco's at 6 for me, by the way. I would take the Vikings, Texans, Lions, and Ravens.
I have them at 6 too. I have Houston 1 spot ahead of them. I'm just saying.
But I don't have them in this group.
I think that they have to be in this group. How long? They lost the game outright to Minnesota. They had chances to come back. They didn't. So that's like their one true loss, I feel like. And the other games are just games they should have won. And yeah, they get docked a bit for blowing it towards the end, but it's not like I have Cincinnati 30th in the power rankings, despite being 1-4. Like, they're a pretty good team. The San Francisco is San Francisco in terms of talent, where they project the rest of the season, and until they go like 3-9 or something like that. I mean, just when we look up, like you said, in like 6 weeks, if you'd be surprised they'd be at number 2, that's why they consistently remain in this tier for me.
Okay, and that's fine. Again, we have different tiers because mine is an entire tier 1. I don't feel like the way that they look any given week with it's always something going wrong, like they're a true contender right now. They are a contender because my next group is contenders, and that's just the way that we're kind of differing our tiers right now. But I just think there's a big 5, in my opinion. I'm not putting them in that group until they at least show some kind of consistency. Stop having an excuse every single week.
Well, I guess the opposite team of the Niners so far is Houston, who I do have at number 5. I don't know if Nico Collins is going to play next week. They're already calling him day-to-day, but that's what they said about A.J. Brown. That's what they've said about every single player with a hamstring injury so far this season. Then they don't play for 3 weeks. So Xavier Hutchinson was the guy who replaced Nico Collins at the X position at receiver, whereas Robert Woods would be the fill-in for Stefan Diggs and Tank Dell should anything happen to them. So it's Hutchinson over Woods if you were looking for the deep pickup and trying to project onto New England next week. And I very much doubt that it's going to be Christian Gonzalez going mano-a-mano with Xavier Hutchinson. So he might actually be a decent play against the Patriots, where I think that he probably takes out Diggs or Dell or maybe some combination of the two, occasionally ending up on Hutchinson. But he would be the guy that I'd be looking at right now. But Houston does not have an impressive win on their resume as of yet. They have these like squeak out wins that they keep getting, and they got whacked by Minnesota.
Yeah, but Minnesota, I have at number 2. So, like, it really comes down to they win the games that they're supposed to win. And there's, relatively some difficult teams-ish on there. So, again, like, we can nitpick all day long. They're not a huge gap. I just think the Houston Texans, and I wore the shirt not to be the homer. I wore the shirt because I thought it's a fun shirt, and also just to be excited about the fact that they're 4-1.
So tier 3 for me consists of 5 teams right now. And one of them, after Sunday Night Football is a little bit tougher. But going from 9 to 7, Green Bay. Going from 27 to number 8, the Washington Commanders. Atlanta is at number 9 from 14. Tampa, I still did move up because it's been 2 weeks since we've done this. Tampa goes from 15 to 10, and Pittsburgh goes from 7 down to 11. Really starting to worry about the Steelers' offense. I was concerned about it already, but if you score 20 points on the Steelers, you're probably going to beat them. And they should have beat Dallas on Sunday Night Football. So it's not that they played poorly, but they lack credible upside. But I do feel like they're a team that could almost beat anyone on a given week too because of TJ Watt, and if Fields just doesn't turn the ball over, they're fine.
Yeah. Although the issue here is you have 2 teams here that I have in the next. I only have 5 teams in this tier. Oh, wait, did you have 5 too? Or 6?
I had 5.
At 5, we have different teams. Actually, quite a bit different teams. But I have Pittsburgh and Atlanta down at 11 or 12. Both of them, not or 12, 11 and 12. Because of what you're saying. They're 3-2, but there's still a couple teams that would take over them just because of what you said. Is like the loss against Dallas. Like, honestly, watching that game last night, there's no reason the Cowboys should have won that game. And I don't have the Cowboys this high. I have Cowboys behind both of them. Even at 3-2. Atlanta, this is great. Like, Kirk Cousins went bananas, and it's happening, but also is kind of like shootout. Like, where's their defense, and is that going to be every single week for them? And then their inconsistency. So I don't have a huge issue with them. Just what you're saying is why I don't really trust the team either. So when you kind of like lay out your tiers, and you're kind of like, who are these teams? So I have 5, and then I go Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Dallas, Tampa Bay, Saints. That's like my next tier, because all 5 of those teams to me feel like any given week, I don't know who the hell you are.
I think that's most of the NFL this season. Like, if Kansas City is if we're both saying that Kansas City is the number 1 team and they haven't looked very good, for as much crap I just talked about Houston and their lack of impressive wins, I would say the exact same thing about the Chiefs. They just happen to have Patrick Mahomes and they're the defending Super Bowl champions, and they haven't lost yet. So you kind of got to keep rolling them out there as the number 1 team. But it does seem like the gap between like 1 and 20 right now is a lot closer. Like, we don't have these teams that are head over heels way better than everyone else. I just don't see it with anyone.
Sure. So and I would agree with that.
So you can nitpick all these teams all you want. So I have Green Bay at 7. Do you think we see Romeo? Do you think that we see Romeo Doubs again playing for the Packers? Like, is this a 1-week thing? He'll be back, no problem.
Yes, but I don't know if it's a 1-week thing. That's kind of more.
We've entered the trade portal with Devontae Adams wants a trade. It looks like Amari Cooper is going to be widely available. Why wouldn't Kid Romeo be out there too?
Because this needs to be clarified of what the real issue is. If this is true and he didn't show up to practice 2 days because he wasn't happy with his role, which is the weirdest part because, oh, by the way, leading in routes and targets, and it's like, but I'm not happy with my role. You're just not happy it's not working? You're also talking about games, plural, without Jordan Love. Like, I just feel like there's something more here. Like, not happy with your role, Devontae Adams, on a bad team. Not happy with your role, Amari Cooper, on a bad team with a terrible quarterback, although the Raiders too. Like, I get those. I don't get the report that Dobbs is completely unhappy, and that's everything that's going on. It feels like something else, and that's why I said I don't know if it's 1 week. Because if it's just unhappy and frustrated with practice, we already did this with Brandon Ayuk on a good team as well. And then everything was fine with Brandon Ayuk, new contract, and everybody blew up the fact he wore the wrong shorts and he ripped them all. And I remember I saw a post that was like, throws a temper tantrum on the field. And I watched the video and I was like, there was kind of words exchanged and he took off the shorts in the middle of the field. And like, that's a temper tantrum. So I want to know what the true story is because I don't feel like it's just unhappiness. So I feel like we see Dobbs. But I would still be okay for talking about us in fantasy purposes. I am not dropping Wicks. If he's still out there and somebody else drops him, I am 100% going after Wicks. The highest targets on the team. There was just misses all around. Like some of those passes were on Wicks. Some of those passes weren't great opportunities from Jordan Love. They were kind of 50-50 balls and they just didn't happen. And it's the same thing I told you, Pat, and I know you agree. It was like, it's the Quentin Johnston. It's the Eric Ebron. All the eyes of the fantasy world, because the entire fantasy world was on Dontavian Wicks as a top 30 wide receiver this week. Everybody was watching him, and it wasn't happening early, everybody was watching even more and more intently. So it was magnified the fact that there was drops, which are going to happen most any single week, and now everybody hates him because they hated Eric Ebron, they hate Quentin Johnston, and now they hate Dontavian Wicks.
I actually have Quentin Johnston, my number one wide receiver pickup. I was shocked to see he was available in 80% of leagues on Yahoo.
Yeah, because he had the bad game and a bad matchup, which was the Ladd McConkey game, which I know you and I didn't talk about last week, but I know a lot of people, not only myself, were saying this just was a bad situation for Johnston, which was the same conversation the week before that if you were picking him up, understand it was a tough schedule with a bye mixed in, so you have to be patient. Do not turn around and immediately drop him if it's a bad game. And yet that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, so if you want to find the pickup rankings, they're down in the description. And I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, the quick morning updates where I have the waiver pickups, the injury news, all condensed in less than 8 minutes. If you want to go check those out, those are on Mayo Media Network right now. So please go sub. Washington at number 8. Am I being too generous here? Because this is, if you take a look at the best offenses through 5 weeks of this century, they're number 4.
And so it can't be too aggressive because I am at 7.
Okay,
so there
good.
you go. And it really comes down to it's respecting what we're seeing on the field. And I know it's the Browns who have zero offense, but the defense is starting to play really well. Starting to play well too.
Washington's. I thought you meant Cleveland's defense, which is not good.
Oh, no. No, they lost everything. They're not good at anything anymore. And you got to just respect the team at this point. This kind of feels like, and not to talk about my dating life, but when Nicole and I first met, it was like, oh, this is going so well. We're both, and we kind of talked about like our personalities. And we're like, we're waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, they were like, what's wrong? Like something like, oh, I'm going to find out something next week. Like, you didn't tell me about your second wife in Australia. Like, the Commanders just feel like the shoe's going to drop. Like 1 week, somebody's going to figure out this offense and figure out Jaden Daniels and his rookie play and be like, oh, now they can't do anything on offense. Or on the flip side, their defense is exposed and it still isn't very good in the secondary. It just feels like they shouldn't be here, but similar to my argument for the Vikings is why I have them at 7. They are here on performance so far, and honestly, you could argue higher. I'm not going to, but you want to say Washington, the way they've been playing, deserves to be in the same conversation as Detroit, then I wouldn't argue much.
It's a lack of competition, I think, is why people are expecting the other shoe to drop, and they'll get some real competition this week. I think the best thing, if you're a bettor, that could happen with Washington is they get absolutely smoked at Baltimore this week. But then they go Panthers, Bears, Giants, Steelers, 4 games that are wildly winnable for all of them, but they get like decreased in the market because they get visibly beaten up by the Ravens in the spot. So I think their offensive line is actually something that I was just way down on coming into the year. And we're all so bad at trying to predict who's a good offensive line and who's not. We just think about consistency. I mean, that's one of the problems with the Browns offense too, is that they're missing their 2 best O-linemen, and with the Rams as well. And that's one of the impressive things about the Rams so far this year is they have 3 of their starting O-linemen on injured reserve already. They had missed another one for that Arizona game when they got absolutely tuned, but that was it. Like, they're making it happen, especially on the ground with Kyron Williams, and Stafford's just getting the ball out faster. He is taking some punishment, obviously, but that offense is still functional somehow. If that was most teams and most quarterbacks and most coaches, this would not be working as well as it is for the Rams. Not that they're going to the Super Bowl or anything, but with most of these injuries, they would be the Cleveland Browns, especially with how bad their defense has been through the first 5 weeks. So with Washington, we'll see if their defense gets exposed a little bit against Baltimore. But fantasy-wise, obviously it's McLaurin, obviously it's Brian Robinson, and Jaden Daniels. I still like Noah Brown, despite the fact that he missed the game with a groin injury, but I don't know if he's a fantasy starter. He's someone that I'd keep around to see if he develops more into a role. But like Zach Ertz is getting 8 targets and doing legitimately nothing with them. Like those McLaurin, maybe Eckler in the off chance that you play in a deeper league. But that's it. There's like 4 guys you can start from this historically great offensive team, which is just really weird to think. Like when this was the 2000 Rams, you're like, oh yeah, play Isaac Bruce, play Torrey Holt, play Ricky Prohl. He could be out there. He'd be, he was the prototype of Brandon Stokely that would come years later. Like there was a ton of guys you could play. Hell, you could play like Azahir Hakeem if you wanted to some of those games. As like, hey, he's an upside wide receiver 4, but like no, on this Washington team that like doesn't exist. Like 1 week it will be Diami Brown. 1 week it might be Luke McCaffrey. Maybe it'll be Zacchaeus. Like there's no rhyme or reason who it's going to be on Washington. And maybe that's a part of their strength on offense.
Sure, but I actually yes on Eckler. And look, it's a floor play because every single week it's 9 to 13, 14 points. But every single week it's 9 to 13 points. Like it's just he's putting it out there every single week. So I'm good with Eckler. I think he's basically top 30 running back in half and full point PPR. That like where I would rank him every single week. Again, on the lower end, he's basically last year's Jacoby Myers at running back. Like you're just going to go out there and you're going to get your points. So I say yes to that. The Ertz, I'm glad you brought that up because I said that to Meany on the show last week. I was like, people are legitimately excited about Zach Ertz getting 6 points a week because of how bad the tight end position is. It's like, oh, I know I can get 6, so let's go play Zach Ertz. I'm not worried about Zach Ertz. I'd rather just take home run flyers because what is 6 going to do for you? Similar to your argument a lot of time when we start talking about wide receiver 4s. Like, what does 6 really do for you in your matchup? Like, if 6 makes the difference, like maybe, okay, you'll have one of your toss-up matchups any given week, but most weeks you want to just shoot for the guy who's potentially going to get 15 to 18, and that's never Ertz. So I'm just not in on Ertz this week. Yeah, maybe it happens. I pulled it up. I was interested to see when we were talking about this. All the lines are at 6.5 and 7 for the Ravens. So the betting market, or at least Vegas right now, also thinks this is going to be a pretty big stomp anyway. So it's actually the second biggest line right now.
Atlanta is number 9 for me. I'm more than halfway home to my Darnell
12.
Mooney season-long prop of his over receiving yards. He's at 330 yards after the 100-yard performance against the Buccaneers last Thursday night. It's not him I want to talk about. I have him as the second best pickup of the week at receiver behind Quentin Johnston, just because I think you're going to have these boom and bust games with Mooney, and just trying to buy everything that you saw on Thursday night, I think is just very much fool's gold with this offense. Has been an offense that's been slow to react out of the gate, and maybe it's getting better, but the defense usually plays a lot better too. They're just not going to play a ton of games where the total would be, an over of 65.5. So when I think about Mooney, obviously you should own him, and he probably is a fringe wide receiver 3, maybe one with a little bit more upside than that too. But it's Bijan that I'm starting not necessarily to worry about, because I do think it's this hamstring problem that's dogging him that he's playing through. But is this just what Bijan is? He's like a split back guy?
So we had Josh Kendall on SiriusXM on Thursday. He covers the Falcons for The Athletic. And we asked that question. Our first question at the gate was, what the hell is wrong with Kyle Pitts? Because that's all anybody wanted to know. But the second question we asked was about Bijan Robinson. And he said it's actually twofold. Didn't even talk about the injury. He just said that Tyler Algier, it continues to be explosive, and they want to have him mixed in. They just want to mix him in because you can't ignore what he brings to the game. And you've seen some more explosive plays. He's like, Bijan's not losing the role. Bijan's going to be the lead running back for the entire season unless hurt. But Algier's not going to go away. So I think that Bijan is back end RB1, where everybody was drafting him top 3, 4 running back because they assumed no Arthur Smith. And I had him as a top 5 running back as well. No Arthur Smith was going to fix everything, and it didn't. It's just you can't ignore Algier. That's the issue. So maybe if they had a lesser running back, and maybe if Algier gets hurt, finally we'll get Bijan Robinson as a top 2 or 3 running back. But as it stands, it's because they want Algier involved.
Is anyone on Pittsburgh a good fantasy play? A good one. But not to say that you can't play Najee Harris, but do you ever want to?
Not really, but I would consider Justin Fields a good. I still play Justin Fields would be a QB1 every single week. I know he's had some down games this year, and the down. I was gonna say unlike previous years. Not that he hasn't had down games. Previous years, it's been Justin Fields. What the hell are you doing? Interceptions, fumbles, blah blah blah. The down games this year have just been more of like didn't need to do much and just wasn't doing much, or just the offense wasn't clicking. Like last night, it just wasn't a lot happening. I actually had him inside my top 10 because I assumed he'd be able to run up the middle himself quite a bit in that game, and just wasn't happening. So I would still have Justin Fields as a QB1. Feel good about him, but Najee Harris, as long as everybody's hurt, sure, as a low-end RB2, but not. Put it this way, you said good. I say those two are good. I don't feel great. I don't get excited about anybody. Put it that way. I don't get excited about anybody on the Steelers.
I think that Fields, because he's on a better team now, and one that is trying to rein him in, and knowing that if he goes off the rails a little bit, that's probably curtains for him as the starting QB. He needs to continue to do what Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith are preaching to him. Just do not turn the ball over. That he wasn't necessarily able to do, but he's been better at it this year, and like the bonehead decision-making hasn't completely gone out the window, but it's been mitigated so far, and that's how they're going to cobble together games to try to win them. And I think that adversely affects George Pickens and his overall upside. Like when I said good players, like if I don't have my rest of the season rankings in front of me, because spoiler alert, I don't do those. But if I did, I'd probably have Pickens at like wide receiver 28 to 30, like right around there. Doesn't that sound about right?
That's pretty much the range that he's in. They did an article asking like the trade scenarios, and one of the teams included for Devontae Adams was the Steelers. In real life, sure, cool, whatever. But real life, I don't really think it makes that big of a difference because they don't need him. They barely even incorporate Pickens, and that was my point. Is Pickens is a wide receiver 3, seen everything in the passing game, basically, for all intents and purposes. Like, what is Adams going to do to this team? Nothing. And like, it's just going to destroy Pickens. So I'm with you. Pickens is in the wide receiver 3 conversation. It's basically like Terry McLaurin with a terrible quarterback. He gets all the targets and all the volume, but that only equates to wide receiver 27.
I really enjoyed Tampa's fantasy offense because I feel like I know where the ball is going. Now, McMillan and Trey Palmer both missed the game on Thursday night. The defense looked way worse than it has all season long. I wouldn't expect that to happen. But, I mean, if Bucky Irving doesn't fumble, they win the game. If Levante David just knocks the ball down and doesn't pick it off, they win the game. So I'm not too worried about their overall prospects. I actually think they're pretty good. But offensively, it's a lot like Carolina in a weird way where it's like, hey, I know Godwin's going to get his 6 to 10 targets a game. I know Evans is going to be the red zone receiver, and he's going to get anywhere between like 4 and 8 targets a game. Kate Otten will be mixed in sometimes. Bucky Irving will get his few touches on the ground. Rashad White will be the guy used in the receiving game out of the backfield and pick up another like 6 to 12 touches. It's really fun to have an offense where you know what's going to happen. And it's so rare these days.
It's a very simple projections too. You just kind of put them out there. They're going to get their numbers and they're going to continue going forward. That was Godwin's worst game of the season and it was still usable across all leagues. But for power rankings wise, this is why I have the Falcons lower than you do, because as you just said, they could very easily be 2 and 3. And I actually go Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Dallas, Tampa Bay in order, all those 3 and 2 teams, because all those 3 and 2 teams I feel like could go either way facing each other any given week. And to be clear, I know you don't. I have them all behind the Eagles.
All behind the Eagle? What does that mean?
Yeah. I have Eagles at 10.
Okay, so let's pick that point to talk about the Eagles, because my tier 4 is 3 teams that I think are going to be better, but just currently are not. So I kept them a bit above, and I'm way more down on Dallas than you are. But I have Philly at 12, down from 10, Buffalo at 13, and Cincinnati at 14. I just think the rest, like the Eagles coming off this bye and getting everyone healthy, I think people are sleeping a little bit on a team that was basically favored to win the NFC 5 weeks ago.
And that's why I still have Philly at 10. Like, I legit still believe in them. And I have Buffalo up there with them. And I have Cincinnati, for your point, I have Cincinnati at 16. And I still have Cincinnati pretty high for being 1 and 4. They should have almost been, not should have, they had a chance to be 2 and 3. And then people thought a lot differently about them. But I still think that Buffalo and the Eagles are contenders. I am worried about Josh Allen without Khalil Shakir, as we just saw. But I'm just worried about Josh Allen in general. 4 touchdowns in the one game. The other 4 games, 4 passing touchdowns. Like, this offense is broken, but they still continue to win games. There's 3 and 2. They still continue to be contending in most games. So I feel like kind of the argument for your 49ers scenario, and I'm not saying like, I'm not trying to be like, got you on this one, but like, that's where I'm coming from with like the Bills and the Eagles, is that even though it's been rough, the Eagles with no Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown together, no A.J. Brown for half their season to start so far, coming out of the bye, getting healthy, I'd still take the Eagles over the Cowboys. I still take the Eagles over most of the NFC, and I would still take the Bills over most of the AFC, thinking that But if you ask me, like, which one do I have more concerns about, I would actually say I have more concerns about the Bills than I do the Eagles.
I do as well, and it's mainly defensive related and the offensive firepower. They're probably not going to get Devontae Adams, but they were actually the team that I was thinking if the Packers traded Romeo Doubs. That would be the perfect fit.
And I would hate it for my boy Shakir, but that's the team that needs Devontae Adams. 100% Josh Allen's doing pretty good with Shakir as his one, but he needs a one. That Stephon Diggs loss is bigger than anybody was expecting.
And not only losing Diggs, but losing Gabe Davis as well, who is not a one, but functioned very well in that offense as your one every 3 weeks or so.
Sure. You could say that's the thing. Like, is it Gabe Davis, or is it just the connection that was there? Because
it could be.
The Bills game yesterday, Matt Collins had 3 plays he could have had that were Gabe Davis-like.
Okay, so here's, because I saw people pointing to it. I'm kind of worried that Josh Allen might not play on Monday night because he most definitely sustained a concussion. Then they gave him, and he's like, "Yeah, my ankle hurts." And you see him like sniffing smelling salts on the sidelines.
That was the security guard thing where it's like, "Hey, do I have a concussion?" He's like, "Nope, go ahead."
Yeah, you're fine. I mean, dude, they gave him the same medical treatment as they did with hockey players on the bench in 1974. So the NFL might need to look into that one. I hope he plays for the Bills' sake, but their defense just looked absolutely terrible until Nico Collins went down, and then the Houston offense looked terrible. They were using Dare instead of Cam Akers as their primary ball carrier out of the backfield, which is just not something I thought I would ever see. This is probably the end of the line for Cam Akers. You squeeze as much juice was in that orange as possible. That's probably the end of it if Pierce or Mixon or both end up coming back next week. But the stat line I think was very misleading on Josh Allen, because you mentioned Matt Collins. There was 2 Keon Coleman plays. One hit him in the back of the fucking head. That was like, what's happening here? And the moment he turned around, he ended up scoring a touchdown. Kincaid just was useless for the first half. He kept dropping everything. I think I counted there was 8 passes that Josh Allen put on the money that they didn't come down with.
And yeah, that's kind of my argument of like why I think there's still some hope for the Bills here, is because it's like bad news bears. Like everything you just laid out, that's kind of what it was like watching. It's just, are they trying? It was tongue in cheek, but honestly, if you watch that game, like Pat, you take that game and you put it in week 18 and there's potential the number 1 pick on the line. And it's not the Bills. You would assume they were tanking for the number 1 pick. Like that game, and that includes the play calling. Like what the hell were they doing at the end of the game, passing out of the end zone, getting the clock stopped? Like they tried to lose that game, and they did.
Cincinnati at 14, that's down from 13. They've been in a bunch of these coin flip games, and they've lost every single coin flip. It's going to get better for them unless they decide, hey, this isn't our year. Trade T. Higgins, get him out of there, get like a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, whatever for him, and just try to rebuild that way. But as long as they keep running out the team, they're like the best fantasy team that you can go to right now because their offense is potent and their defense sucks. It's a perfect recipe.
So you might see me trying to pick up a second job next Monday, because if I'll give you a hint, did not already lay a ton of money on the Bengals line, only being 3 and now 3.5 against the Giants. Yes, all day long. This team is significantly better than the Giants.
What I would worry about with the Giants, and we'll get to the Giants here in a little bit because they've moved up marginally in my rankings a bit, is that their pressure rate is off the charts good. Like their D-line is actually good.
That's always, that's the thing. That's the only saving grace. But
no, and we forgot that Dayball is a good coach offensively. He can make not a lot happen with a pile of crap, but even without Neighbors, like that offense was very functional. And Daniel Jones is going to give you 6 out of 18 good games. And we just saw one of them. And he could do it again against this bad Cincinnati team. I just don't know if the Giants can actually stop Cincinnati.
That's the thing. So all right. So the defensive line thing was something that I even talked about to start the season. That defensive line front is one of the best in the NFL. The problem is they have no secondary. So as soon as you can get past it or hold off some pressure, you can tear them pieces. And we've seen that already. And I don't know why to bring the Seahawks into this conversation. I don't know why they abandoned the run so quick. I don't know what Grubb was thinking, because they didn't have any issues and they just went away from it and they started throwing the ball all day long. And that Seahawks offense was disjointed as it was. Like Gino, like DK fumbled. Jackson Smith and Jigba dropped passes he should have been catching. And it's just like, it was a team that kind of comes into this conversation. It's like, they're better than they were yesterday. Are they the what was they 3-0 to start? Like, they're not an undefeated team, but they're better than. I would still take them over the Giants on a future week. But that's why I'm saying taking the Bengals all day long. And Dable, yes, and maybe the last year's issue was the Kafka problem, but at the same time, the Seahawks defense is just piss poor. They can't do anything on defense, and they just let Jared Goff have perfect 18 for 18, and Daniel Jones started that game 11 for 12. This defense is just trash. You give Daniel Jones, like, I love to hate on the guy, you know that. You give Daniel Jones a few seconds in the pockets, and he can make throws. A lot of NFL quarterbacks can make throws. So I think that just happened to be the fact if I would exploit going forward. I mean, honestly, with or without McCaffrey, which will be without, but the 49ers should just put up 30 plus on the Seahawks with a blink of an eye this week.
For almost about 2 decades, the irons were really the only good part of my golf game, unless you include 300-yard drives, which meant hitting it about 150 yards straight and 150 yards with slice into the woods to the right. So I finally went and got lessons, straightened out my swing, and all of a sudden I could drive the ball pretty decently, pretty straight. And then my irons just kind of went wayward with the new compression that I was getting onto the ball. So it was time for me to make a change with my irons. So when I heard about the new PXG Black Ops irons and how they can dramatically improve my game, I had to give them a try. Booked a fitting with the PXG location, brought in my current irons, and took the PXG challenge. The staff was amazing. We worked on my ball flight through TrackMan in order to find the perfect irons and the perfect length and the perfect loft for what my game demands these days. And the new Black Ops irons are incredibly easy to hit, they maximize performance, and they're fun. Oh, and they're only $149.99 a stick. That is a great price for a great golf iron. So take the PXG Irons Challenge. It's a ton of fun, and if PXG's new Black Ops irons don't outperform your current irons by delivering either more distance or tighter dispersion, that means better accuracy, during your fitting, you'll get a $250 MasterCards reward card. Hurry, this offer ends October 7th. Book your fitting today at pxg.com. That's pxg.com. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. That one is on Thursday Night Football. The Niners at the Seahawks. The Seahawks do kick off the next tier for me at number 5. Tier number 5 at number 15. Chicago's 16. New Orleans is number 17. Kendrick Miller's.
Yep.
I feel like those teams are all so different, but on the same overall skill level when you take the summation of everything. The Seahawks should be better than this, but they're just not. It's a problem.
It comes down to their defense. You talk about this tier, I could see it being the Bears are on the way up, the Seahawks are on the way down, and then the Saints are just the Saints. They just kind of like you said, they're all kind of different.
Yeah, I don't even really know what to do with them. DK's a play every single week. I don't even with JSN and Lockett. One of them is probably going to have a decent game, but they don't really ever have any of that upside that you're looking for. Every few weeks, maybe it's just a roulette spin, and I just want to take my money off the table.
Oh, 100%. I don't have any Smith and Jigba or Lockett this year because of that, and we didn't talk last week, but coming off the game last week before now their 5th game, I brought that up to Meany, and I said you're getting essentially one really good game of Smith and Jigba, one really good game of Lockett, and a couple in betweens, and that's going to continue to be the path going forward. As it's going to be, you're just not going to know. You can try to play matchups, but it's more of what we go back to a lot, and we talk about this in fantasy, and I just want to impress this on everybody, is when you have players like Lockett and JSN, and you can go down the list, Darnell Mooney, a little bit higher, but you get the point, is like you just have to keep them in your lineup. Like, stop trying to figure out the matchups, because teams, yeah, you can get the matchups like the Porters of the world and stuff like that, but at the same time, teams will get wide receivers away from other players. And unless it's a team that's like specifically like this is a matchup 100%, they're going to travel all that. Surtain is like one of like four I'd be significantly concerned about. And that's why I said I wouldn't even try to play the matchups too much, because Lockett just might get moved. Smith and Jigba might just get moved. All three of them should have went off yesterday against the Giants, and they could have. There was just drop passes and fumbles and everything like that. And I had DK Metcalf as a top 10 play. He should have destroyed this team, and it's just a bad day.
Chicago, Caleb Williams starting to look a lot better. Maybe it's just when you drop a rookie in, not everyone's going to be Jaden Daniels right away. It may take a few games to get your sea legs underneath of you, or they face two teams in a row that really don't generate any pressure, gave him a bit of time, and then all of a sudden, it's like he's playing at USC again.
I would lean more towards that, but I also lean towards the speed. He's starting to catch up to the speed of the NFL, because you hear that all the time from whatever position any player plays going from college to the NFL. You know, they talk about it all the time. It's like that's the biggest thing, is the speed. As you go from, I don't think it was Caleb Williams, but it was one of the quarterbacks talking about, like, you know, you go in the NFL or go into college and you make a questionable throw and it gets batted down. He's like, in the NFL, it's intercepted and gone. Like that window shrinks, and it's that speed. And I think Caleb is starting to adjust to the speed, and you're seeing that because yes, the pressure, but I was watching too, and some of the plays that he extended, and the difference in him being from Daniels or Lamar Jackson is like when he extends plays, he doesn't like to run, and he tries to play more in the pocket and extend outside of it and find somebody downfield. A lot of the complaints is what he did that at USC last year and made questionable throws, the hero throws, and then they end up getting knocked down or intercepted. But he was starting to see more things and make more completions after extending plays. So I like what we're seeing from Caleb Williams. They get Jacksonville, and obviously not a concern, but I'm with you in the fact of like, oh, if they were playing the Ravens this week coming off that game, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not ready to trust Caleb Williams yet.
So yeah, the next four, Jacksonville, Washington, Arizona, and New England, four defenses which are in the bottom half of the league, most of those near the very bottom, and especially in terms of pressure rate, Jacksonville is fifth worst. Washington's pressure rate's actually quite high, so that could be a tricky game for him in terms of the mistakes. Yeah. Arizona's just below average, and New England's the seventh worst, so it should be a pretty good 4 weeks for him, I think. Depending on the league that you play, like Kirk Cousins is 51% owned, so he didn't make my pickup rankings for week 6 streamers against Carolina. He'd be number one of that bunch. If it's not him, it's Caleb Williams. And you could probably start him for like 4 games in a row.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's brought DJ Moore back to life, which is nice.
It is, but to tie into the Seahawks, I think that we're going to get, as long as Keenan Allen's healthy, you're going to get the switching and swapping of Allen and Odunze, but at a worse level.
I completely agree. And I mentioned this to Meanie. He was in studio for the recap show. If you missed it, go check that out with me, him, and Cuss. That is there any player in the NFL who gets arm tackled more than DeAndre Swift? Like, in order for him to be successful, no one can touch him.
I'm laughing because you're not wrong.
And listen,
he's a wrestler. You get that half of a WAP clothesline and he goes down.
But they've been doing a better job of getting him into space and opening up holes for him. And he's so fast that he does avoid a lot of contact. But you just see, you're like, oh man, he broke off a 50-yarder. He broke off a 30-yarder. It's like, oh, that guy hit him in the heel. He's down.
I was just about to say that. Like, he gets tapped in the shin too. And it's like, he's tripping down like where like even Bijan and Barkley and all the rest, like they're just running through it. And it's like him, you just slap on the ankle and he goes down. That's too funny. You're not wrong.
I do think he's a sell high, although I mentioned the 4 straight matchups that he looks really good in, and he might be fantastic for these 4 weeks. But he's still, like, Roschon has control of the goal line. I know Swift ended up getting in for the touchdown, but third downs, goal line situations, and even a lot of passing downs, it's a lot of Roschon Johnson and short yardage situations. So I do think that we've not necessarily, like, we've seen the best of DeAndre Swift. Now, he can get right around that again in some of these matchups, but he could also just not score a touchdown and be useless too.
Yeah, I would consider sell high, and then I would even start to talk. And then, like, if you can't pull it off before the Jaguars game to get, like, RB2 value, to what you brought up before against the Commanders, I'm not terrified of them, but that'd be a game, like, if he face plants against the Commanders, you're going to lose all potential value. And it's possible because of what you brought up about the Commanders. So I would push to get talks going. And then especially if he goes off against the Jaguars, then I would really press hard.
New Orleans, once again, at 17, the last team in this tier. They play Monday night against the Chiefs. They might beat the Chiefs and move up a little bit, but we're starting to see who New Orleans really is, and it's not the team from week 1 or week 2. It's not probably as bad as we saw each of the past 2 weeks. It's somewhere in the middle, but that high-flying offense probably isn't a real thing.
Well, I was about to say is I think the middle is just the outcomes of being on either end of the spectrum any given week. Like, I don't think we're going to get a lot of the middles. If the New Orleans Saints was a player, they'd be Deshaun Jackson.
I like that. That's perfect. Or they would just be Raheed Shaheed.
There you go.
Tier number 6 consists of 6 teams for me. Arizona at number 18, Dallas at number 19, the Chargers coming off the bye week at number 20, Denver at 21, and the New York Jets at number 22. The biggest faller in these rankings from 2 weeks ago have been the New York Jets. They just dink and dunk down the field, and their defense isn't all that good.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Rodgers beyond toast, it looks like. That's why I brought up Garrett Wilson as a sell high. All those targets barely cracked 100 yards. A good opportunity for people that were like, oh, maybe this is the beginning. The broadcast even said this. Maybe it's the beginning of Garrett Wilson getting it right. I'm like, no. This offense is broken. And maybe, like you brought up the offensive line thing. This was supposed to be a revamped. They made moves over the past couple seasons. This offensive line was supposed to be good, and the offensive line has been pretty poor, among the worst. I don't know if you have their pressure rate, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the bottom 10. There was one other team. I have the Chargers, Jets, Broncos, Cardinals. I do have Dallas a little bit higher. The one team that I actually switch in for my tier, I do have 5 teams in this tier too, is I have the Dolphins in here. Only because...
Oh my God, I have the Dolphins at 31. They're the second worst team in football.
No, because here's why. Like, they're staying 2 and 3 is they're staying afloat, similar to the Packers with Malik Willis. And there's been reports that already said doctors have cleared Tua and he doesn't need to stop playing football. They have their bye coming up, and Tua comes back after the IR. What does he have 2 more weeks on the IR?
Yeah,
and he's back.
But that bye week is in there as well. So we won't see Tua at the earliest until week 9. Listen, they're a game out of third place in the AFC because anyone at 2 and 3.
That's why
it's the same reason that the Bengals aren't buried either, because the AFC is kind of smushed at this point, where there's still time to make up some of these games. I just worry, like, it just seems like a season from hell for them. Like, they lose A-Chain this week. Maybe he'll be back after the concussion. Javon Holland broke his hand on defense. Ramsey is washed. Both lines aren't good. Like, it's easy to point to Tua and be like, yeah, without Tua, this team is really bad. But they weren't good with Tua through 2 weeks either. Don't forget that.
Sure. I guess I don't believe in Denver. That's the biggest thing.
But Denver has one thing you can point to. Like, Denver's not good. I have them at 21. But their defense is legitimately good. And when we get down to the bottom third of teams, like, being able to be, hey, they have like a top 10 defense. Like, that's good enough for me. That'll win you some games.
And that's the thing. So this week by 2 more weeks, and I know that's a long way projecting, so that's week 9. But you tell me week 9, Tua with the Dolphins versus the Broncos, even in Denver, I'm taking the Dolphins. Maybe I'm stupid.
Maybe. I
don't care.
I mean, we saw the Dolphins offense week 1 against the worst defense in football, and they barely got to 20 points.
Hey, maybe this is a McDaniel problem. We're going to find out he really wasn't a genius. I'm still not selling out on the Dolphins yet.
Okay, yeah, I am. So that's where I'm at right now. The Chargers, we spoke about them briefly. You're higher on Dallas than I am. I just don't get it with Dallas. It's another game they should have lost to Pittsburgh on Sunday night. Granted, they won. They're 3-2. Like, they might make the playoffs, but I have no faith in them doing anything. Like, their defense sucks, and they played Pittsburgh. Like, play like even a league median offense, and they're getting lit up.
So I know I was just about to say, like, the offenses the past 2 weeks have not been terrific, but the defense is at least turning the corner, where I hope that it's not trash. Like, no, look, it's definitely not the top 5 that people thought it was going to be, but is it among the worst in the last 2 weeks? Like, give them some respect.
A little bit.
For who they faced.
They played terrible teams. They should have lost to the Giants. They should have lost to the Steelers. The only reason that they're staying afloat, they have the number 1 special teams in football, mainly due to having the best kicker in football.
So I think there's hope, and you don't. So there you go. I don't know what else to say about this. I do like Rico Dowdle, though. Finally, like, been saying this for weeks, saying this to start the season, like, was better on a per touch basis than Pollard last year. give him a chance. And I said to Meanie on the show, I was like, maybe this is one of those scenarios. You and I talk about it all the time. Lamar Miller, to go back to how far we go back, is that some running backs, when you asked to be the bell cow lead, stink. They were better in the timeshare. But against the Steelers, Dowdle looked good. Like Dowdle, for me, if the Cowboys don't screw around and actually continue to give them, like they don't activate Dalvin Cook and give him touches this week, Dowdle with even 15 touches per week would be a top 20 running back for me.
Top 20's pushing it, I think.
I don't think you realize how bad running back has been already this year.
I think if you start to account injuries and bye weeks, maybe. But would you rather have Najee or Dowdle the rest of the season? I'd rather have
Dowdle.
I'd rather have Najee.
No, I'd rather have Dowdle.
Right.
Najee's nothing, even with all.
Neither is Dowdle. This is the best game he's ever had. He had 80 yards
against the Steelers.
Oh well, the Steelers. Watch out! It was a game where they just had to run.
You just talked about their defense.
Their defense is good. It's not like Dowdle lit it up.
No, he had a really nice game against them, though, for an offense that barely did anything most of the game. He was the only thing doing it well.
I would rather have Tolbert while Cooks is out in my flex than start Dowdle.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
That's the third wide receiver pickup. It would go Quentin Johnson, Darnell Mooney, and then Tolbert because Cooks has been placed on injured reserve, so he's going to miss at least another 3 games. So I like Tolbert in that situation. Arizona's just kind of They're kind of like what I said earlier about the Bucs offense. You kind of know where the ball is going, which is really nice, and you play the guys that they have. They look so good for 5-minute stretches, then just nothing for 30 minutes.
And I don't know about you, but at waiver column, I'm not buying into Michael Wilson. We did this last week and Michael Wilson laid an egg, and it's just, I don't care. Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, I don't care trying to figure it out because now Michael Wilson's coming off a good game against Green Bay. It's going to end up being Greg Dortch or something.
No,
I'm not chasing.
And Zay Jones is eligible to return from a suspension as well. So now you're going to throw him back into the mix too.
Oh, yeah. Good old Zay Jones. Well, that means Trevor Lawrence will play better now, too.
Yeah, it means Christian Kirk won't catch any touchdowns if Zay Jones is playing.
Yeah, exactly.
The Jets, Denver, there's Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams I'd rather have than Rico Dowdle.
Okay. Same tier.
Yeah, same tier, I agree, but Williams would be at the higher end. He's been wildly effective the past 3 games. And just what you talked about, Austin Eckler, it feels like Javonte is just a better version of that, good floor, basically 0 upside.
Yeah. So would you rather have DeAndre Swift or Rico Dowdle?
Oh, DeAndre Swift. Just because I would let him play a game and then try to trade him and then get more value from him later. But I think just objectively, Swift is... I don't know if he's a better actual real-life running back, but he's a better fantasy running back, I think.
No, for right now, yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about. Do you have just all these rest of these teams in the bottom tier?
No, I have 2. I have one little mini tier here, tier 7, consisting of 3 teams that are just not bottom. They're not good, but they're not
Can I guess?
Yeah, you can guess the 3:
Colts, Giants, Raiders.
Colts, Giants, Rams.
Okay.
The Rams are pretty good, but they're not. But they are.
So the reason I did and you're not wrong. I think we're all surprised about the offensive line being able to hold up after losing how many players they lost.
And no Puka. Cooper Kupp should be back week 7, which is nice. Hence why when you look at the pickup rankings, Jordan Whittington is at the very bottom. I'd much rather have Tutu. I've been on Team Tutu over Team Whittington anyway, but with Cooper Kupp coming back, that's the guy that Whittington fills in for. That's the role he plays. Not to say that he'll never see the field again, but every target that he has will now just go to Cooper Kupp.
See, I'm with you, but I also wouldn't drop Whittington because I think there's a potential world for what they want with Whittington for the future that they might try to see if he fills in Tutu gets kicked back a spot. I'm with you, to be clear. I'm just saying I would not drop Whittington just to see it play out because Whittington can also do what Puka Nacua does. And if you've already seen it, it's quote after quote after quote every single week has been from Stafford and McVay, we see the future. We need to get the ball in his hands. There's going to be great ceilings. And I know it's coach speak and stuff, but this is one of those teams coming from the quarterback as well. When you have that kind of coach speak, you kind of at least put one eye on it. So I'm with you. You told me right now ranking for week 7 and Cooper Kupp is back. I would rank Tutu over Whittington, but I just, again, would not drop Whittington in their bye week just to hold off and see how it plays out in that first game.
He makes a ton of money and he has big roster bonuses. But why isn't Cooper Kupp on the trading block either?
Don't know. You're not the first person to say it. I'm 100% with you. This seems like, because to go to the Rams, what I was going to say is they're surprisingly more competitive than we thought they would be after all these injuries.
They are, but they're still 1-4. Yeah,
oh, right. And the injuries keep mounting. They keep getting more. Like, you talk about a lost season. This feels like a lost season. Hell, why isn't Stafford on the trade block? Like, I know, like, you want to look to the future and don't want to get rid of everything, but the Rams conceivably should be one of those teams where it's like, hey, you know what? Everything went wrong. Just blow this to hell and revamp, because holding on for one more year, like, what's going to change next year with Stafford and Kupp? Maybe you're a playoff fringe contender. Cool. Like, you're just kind of caught in this. You have 2 or 3 guys that are on the way out. You already have Donald, who retired. Like, you're about to be forced into revamping. Like, I just feel like this would be get ahead of it.
Weirdly, the worst thing that may have happened to the franchise is McVay and Stafford still being really good at what they do and them being good last year.
Sure.
Because it kept them in the cycle of, hey, we can make the playoffs again. And then, Aaron Donald retires, and then you kind of have the injury season from hell. And now you're not good anymore, and what's going to happen?
I don't know how much you pay attention to the basketball, but they're the Chicago Bulls of the NFL.
No, the Chicago Bulls just love being, like, I get what you mean about being in the middle. Like, are the Rams as a whole right now just the DeMar DeRozan of football?
Wow. Good NBA reference. I didn't realize you paid that much attention to him.
The NBA is the one sport that I follow that I don't cover because I actually enjoy it. But now that I don't live in downtown in Toronto anymore, and I don't go to Raptors games all the time, that I've kind of taken myself out of basketball enough. But I was at those Raptors games when the crowd was like, MVP at DeRozan's. Like, what are you guys watching? Like, this is insanity.
I love it. That's good, though.
So they're there. The Colts, I actually think that they're not going to play Flacco over Anthony Richardson, but I think that they're better with Flacco. The fantasy options are better with Flacco.
Oh, fantasy options, no question about it. But I will say this. Again, we didn't do a show last week, but for the waiver columns, everything I keep saying this is Josh Downs, with or without Richardson, is the one. Because with Richardson, he's still the one. He's the one that fits Richardson, and Pittman falls to the wayside. With Joe Flacco, you still get the same Josh Downs with a potential big play upside for Pittman, and as we saw with Pierce again. But either way, Downs continues, like, he's there, Stephon Diggs. He's the answer. Downs is the answer. Of course, the ceiling's a little bit lower with Anthony Richardson. Yeah, but he's still going to.
But the ceiling is low with Downs anyway. Like, Downs is a floor wide receiver, a floor wide receiver 3. You can play him every single week and get your points. I'm not holding out hope. Like, how many top 10 weeks do you think Josh Downs will ever have? 1 during the course of a season?
1 or 2, but I would actually put him more on the fringe wide receiver 2 conversation, especially if you get good matchup like Tennessee this week, and whether or not it's Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson. Excuse me. You have 4 teams on a bye. I think he could be pushing the top 25 again, like he was last week.
Yeah, but I don't talk about these things with 4 teams on a bye. Like, I'm trying to think about the entire season of where we're looking at it. You're like, when we get to the end of the year, Shaheed will have more points than Josh Downs. It's not going to be fun when you start him, because you're going to have zeros, you're going to have 30s mixed in there. But that's the sort of receiver I would personally rather have.
Would you rather have George Pickens or Josh Downs? I'm taking Josh Downs.
I would take Pickens.
See, we're different on that one.
Okay. Because, I mean, Pickens basically just does what Pickens does with triple the volume what Josh Downs does right now. If for whatever reason, like, Pickens would benefit fantasy-wise with Russell Wilson playing.
You're not wrong. So, but until that happens, I don't think it's going to happen unless Justin Fields gets hurt at this point.
I think we're starting to see the cracks a little bit, because it's 2 weeks in a row where Fields has had just a crippling fumble that, I don't want to say cost them the game, but led to them being behind and not winning the game. One more of those, and Tomlin's going to be like, get the fuck out of here.
I don't know if we're that close. I think he's still doing enough.
I mean, I don't even know if Russell Wilson's healthy enough to play.
He had 2 passing touchdowns last night, and was kind of like a quiet game, and still was able to have that team in contention.
Yeah, but being in contention is not good enough when you're the one who's giving the ball back to the other team. Like, the more Pittsburgh
throwing interceptions,
the fumble was bad, man. And then the better fantasy game Justin Fields has, the less of a chance Pittsburgh has to win.
Okay, sure. I'm not saying for fantasy purposes. I'm just saying for real life. I don't know how you turn to Russell Wilson without it, three bad games in a row. Okay, fine. But I don't think it's going to be one like you.
That's 2 in a row against 2 pretty bad teams.
Because the fumble.
Yeah.
It's going to happen when you have that kind of quarterback anyway.
I know, but that's not what they want in Pittsburgh. They want to listen. Russell Wilson's not going to be fumbling. He just doesn't throw a ton of picks. We even saw that last year.
They're going to be winning games.
Maybe they won't, but they don't need anyone to do a lot at quarterback. They need someone to not fuck up at quarterback.
Okay, sure. Can we get to the bottom tier? I gotta go.
Okay, yeah, bottom tier. Let's go. My bottom tier is Jacksonville, Carolina, Vegas, Cleveland, Tennessee, Miami, and New England. Maybe Drake May will start this week. I've been hearing rumors.
What else are you waiting for at this point? If he's not ready now, and I know he has no wide receivers, but people are like, stash Jalen Poole. Cool. I agree. Cool with Drake May, but they have talent for everybody saying oh, there's nothing for Brissett to throw to. Why aren't we putting some of the blame on Brissett? It's not like there's quarterbacks that are throwing to nothing. If we're going to say Daniel Jones with Wan'Dale Robinson as his one and just had a good day against the Seahawks with Brian Dable calling the plays, maybe we should look internally at the quarterback and the play calling of why Jacoby Brissett can't do anything with no wide receivers. So, and why are we hyping Polk and all the rest of them?
Quick takes on each of these teams. Jacksonville, my question to you, Bigsby or ETN? I think they were in a split situation. ETN played most of the beginning of the game. Bigsby had that big run, and then he just played the rest. I think we're going to see a hot hand situation.
So do I, which means I don't want anything to do with this backfield if I can avoid it, which unfortunately you can't.
Carolina, with Leggett going down, we saw more Mingo. And who was that other dude that actually had a good game out of nowhere from Holy Cross? Fuck's his name?
Oh, Cocker.
Yeah, Coker. Coked out Coker. He's just running down the field.
I thought you were going to call him Cocker. Anyway, Coker. Jalen Coker.
Yeah, Diet Coke out there. But the offense runs through Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Johnson. Bad game for Deontay Johnson. Then they all kind of got scripted out when they got down by too much, and that's going to happen. But with Dalton at quarterback, it's very easy to pinpoint the 2 guys that you want to play from this team.
There is, and I don't think it's actually any of the wide receivers after no Leggett. I would just stick with Deontay Johnson and Chuba Hubbard.
Completely agree. Tommy Tremble got hurt for them as well, and it looks like Ian Thomas is coming back soon. And Sanders had his chance in this game. He had 5 targets and dropped 2 egregious passes that hit him in the hands and hit him in the face.
I thought you were just I thought you were just spitting facts.
No, it wasn't Miles Sanders either. It was Jatavion Sanders. So Jacksonville, Carolina, Brian Thomas, top 15 receiver, top 20 receiver?
Hell yeah. Slap some respect on the name.
Okay. Were people disrespecting him?
No, just people, again, we go back to the preseason. They wouldn't put him in the conversation with those top 3.
Well, he's not. He's not Malik Neighbors. He's just not as good.
He's in the same tier.
No, he's not. In terms of real life talent, not a chance.
Okay, well, because Malik Neighbors is on a tier of his own.
I agree.
Harrison Odunze.
Yeah, I don't know if
Harrison Odunze.
I feel like it's Neighbors, Harrison
and Odunze.
No, I think Odunze's behind those guys. Thomas and Odunze are close.
No, Odunze's stuck in a bad situation. We knew this going in.
Vegas, no one. Because now that AOC might be starting. No, thank you. Bowers.
No. I think there's some hope for Trey Tucker.
Maybe. But he's not good. He's better as a 3 than he is as a 2. This happened to Wicks, too. Wicks is better as a 3 or a 4 than he is as a 2 with real defense watching him.
Trey Tucker in a deeper league. Wide receiver 4. I'm not super excited.
Cleveland? Is Chubb back this week?
Possibly, which would mean he's the only running back I would even trust, and that's even his first game back. I was off on this. I said I don't want nothing to do with these Browns running backs. As soon as the Foreman things that happened, nope, completely gone. Want nothing to do. And if Chubb's not back, still want nothing to do with him.
Cooper or Downs?
Downs.
That's tough. It's a tough seed.
No, it's not. Get Cooper on a new team. We'll talk.
Oh, he's probably going to be on a new team. Hence why I'd rather have Amari Cooper.
I'll wait.
Tennessee, Levis is going to be back. Probably just the running backs, maybe Calvin Ridley. And even the running backs aren't very good.
No, the running backs are it's the Jacksonville Jaguars situation for their running backs. And I think Hopkins is still boomer bust. And he's in that conversation of wide receiver 4 these days. You might get 15, you might get 0.
Is Tyreek Hill the guy you're most actively going after in fantasy right now?
Yes and no, though. Yes, because of what we know, but no, because also the teams know this. They know the same thing. Like,
Yeah, but they might be struggling right now. Like, if you see the Tyreek Hill on the 1-4, 2-3 team with not a ton of points, like, go get Tyreek Hill or go get Jalen Waddle. It's probably even cheaper.
Sure, but again, if you can,
I think that you would be able to.
Again, I don't know. Like, I am in 2 leagues where I've already sniffed offers, and they're still treating him because they see the same report that everybody's seeing now. Is that Tua should be back after his IR? So,
sure, but maybe he's not.
If you could get wide receiver 2 price, yes.
Okay, Brian Thomas, would you trade him for Tyreek Hill right now?
If I'm a winning team,
yes. The answer is yes. Do it.
No, if I'm 1-4 now. I can't wait I can't wait 3 more weeks.
I mean, if you have Brian Thomas and you're 1-4, like, just quit fantasy.
Oh no, there's a lot of people that still don't play double headers, and it might be like the 3rd scoring team and 1-4. I continue to see
then
this,
you're
and
fine.
infuriates
Then
me.
your record doesn't matter. You get in on the points rule.
Not everybody does that.
Well, then they should quit playing fantasy and stop being fucktards.
I legitimately have 30 seconds.
All right, New England, anyone, even with May starting?
With May, sure, maybe Jalen Polk. Ramondre Stevenson, that was a pseudo not starting.
Yeah, good for him. All right, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. Follow Jake at AllInKid. Follow him at theathletic.com. And all my pickups and power rankings and injury reports are down in the description in the Mayo Media newsletter. You can check that out right now. Sub to the channel, code Mayo and Underdog, and smash the like on the way out. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!